Hey guys, Jon here. I'd like to introduce this month's preset pack, Retro Waves. Alright, so everything that you heard was all made from sounds from this pack, Retro Waves. So let's go take a look and see what's inside, because I didn't use every single sound in the pack for this. So yeah, now this is the time to look at that. So over here, we're going to turn off all the effects that we have in our master, and then we're also going to disable some of these scopes here so we have a little bit more room to work with so we can see what we're actually doing. Okay, so right over here, we have Retro Waves. So the first thing that we're going to get is going to be an ARP called Eye of Jupiter. And as you know, this is going to be 20 presets per pack. So this is the first one right over here. As you see here, we have the cutoff, we have some resonance over here, and then we also have an ARP speed in case you want to change the speed of this arpeggio, so something like this. Or really fast. And then as usual, and this is kind of almost globally for most of these presets, here is the effects one is always going to be generally macro number 4. So if you have any extra effects that you'd like to add or maybe dial down the effects a little bit, you can use so with this knob here. Alright, next up is another ARP called Surfing on the Sun. And this one's kind of similar as the one before with the cutoff, resonance, ARP speed, and the effects. Next up, we have a bass called the Basics. Now, this is kind of like a sequence bass, but it's also more like a rhythmic kind of thing. And interesting enough, we're actually not using the sequencer. So for example, if we just soloed over here some of our drums, and kind of similar as well, we're using the speed here to change it according to your tempo. So next up, we have Bass Retro, or BA Retro Bass, and take a listen to this one. So we have our cutoff, our resonance, and a little bit of voice tune that kind of makes it a little bit bigger here. Moving on from there, we have a different version, slightly different sound here, retro bass number 2, and the macros are slightly different. And moving on from there, I thought I would include basically a simple drum set to kind of get things off the ground here. So we have a hi-hat right over here that sounds like this, and there's a lot of different shaping that we can do with this type of hi-hat. So the first macro we have here is going to be tone. So if it's maybe too bright or not bright enough, I would reach for this tone knob and kind of just set it according to the sound that you would like to have. Then we have a decay, so if you want to have a little bit more, I guess, snappy, something kind of like this. A little bit more open. Kind of depends up to you. And there's also a nice little chorus sound that I think does a little kind of cool stuff to it as well. It's more so noticeable once you bring up this decay here. Nice little subtle effect here. And then we have our reverb over here. Next up, we have a retro kick. Now this one also does have quite a few different controls to change the different sounds of this kick here. So right here we have the decay sub. So take a listen to how this changes it. Almost at the top here, we almost kind of get that rumble after the kick hits. And if we want a really quick kick, maybe something kind of like that. So there's a lot of wiggle room to kind of change the sound of this kick here. Now the second one's kind of interesting because this one is called solid, and the more you turn it to the left, it's a little less solid, I would say. Next up, we have the decay noise. So as you know, the kick is made from the fundamental and then also a noise on the top to kind of really simulate that attack sound. So decay noise. In case we're missing a little bit that in the mix. And some traditional distortion here, if you want to get a little bit more of that. And something cool with this kick drum as well. So you know how there's always, especially in these type of retro sounds, there's always this kind of cheesy tom rolls or toms, things like that. So instead of making 3 or 4 different toms and kind of fill up this pack with a lot of extra sounds, I thought it'd be easier to put actually different sounds in there and have this kick drum function as well as tom drums with a little change over here. So if we go over to this wavetable engine over here, we can see that this tune sitting right here, we can see that right now this is set at about 42 hertz, right? To get that fundamental. However, if we go a little bit higher by manually moving this knob maybe to like 120, 200, around kind of here, it starts to simulate those types of tom drums. So within that range, you can basically load up a few different presets of this kick, set a couple, maybe one at like 174, the next one like 150, and then maybe the next one like 120. And there you go. You have 3 different tom drums with all these different controls as we had for the kick. So I thought that would be a little bit more convenient, a little bit more bang for your buck to have a kick drum that's also tom drums and have the pack have other cool stuff rather than just a lot of drums in it. So thought I'd mention that before we move on. Next up, we have another drum called retro snare. Now this one has the tone control here for the first macro. We have some FM noise. Really on the top end, you got to give it a little bit of like a sizzle, kind of crystal-y kind of sound. Now we have the reverb decay and the reverb. So these 2 macros are going to function kind of together. So this fourth one, reverb, is basically the overall amount of reverb that we're going to have on this snare. And then this is going to be the decay, so how quickly this reverb will decay. So it really depends on how much you want to use this. Maybe you want to have a little bit of decay somewhere around here, but you want a little bit less reverb overall, so you'd reach for this knob here and kind of mix these 2 to taste. Or if you don't know reverb, just bring this one down. And there you go. Next up, we have another snare. So this one's going to be different. This is Retro Snare 2. And it's more so that traditional noisy kind of snare, that kind of cheesy fake snare sound that we all know and love. Then we have some reverb here if we would like to add some. I added a lot of room here in case you want to have that big soaked in reverb kind of sound. Totally up to you. Then we have reverb speed. Next up, we have the tone of the snare. So it's an easy way to darken it here. Or brighten it up. And this is the only one of this pack here that does not have all 4 macros. As you can see, this one is unassigned because this is macro number 4. Moving on from here, now we're going to get into some keys. So this is this digital 80s organ sound. Then we have a traditional cutoff over here. A resonance. Then we also have a sub here. If we take this off, we're going to notice it's going to be much more thin. Then we bring in the sub here. And then we have our traditional effects here for the 4th macro. And that is dry over here and then back to wet. So that one's a lot of fun to play here. Now this next one here is called Smooth Low Keys. Now so this one is more so designed to stay a little bit in a lower register. Something kind of down here. Maybe at a little bit of a slower pace. You can play up there, but it gets a little bit more dissonant on the higher notes. So we have our cutoff over here, as well as our resonance, pretty common. And similar as the patch before, we also have the sub here. If we want a little bit more low end, that we don't need, or if we have low end, we can always dial this back. If we need some low end, that's what this one here is here for. And then effects wet and dry. Now we're going to get into our leads. So this pack comes with quite a lot of leads that just kept coming out. So I followed that timeline here. So this first one is called Falling in Love. So something to mention while we're here on lead. So when I was making this track here that we heard at the beginning of the video, there were some times where I had to do a small little adjustment, which is going to be normal, you know, maybe increase the attack or the release a little bit, maybe move the sustain up. So it's very intuitive to do that. So let's say we're playing something like this, right? And we think it fades out maybe a little too fast. All we really have to do is just go to this envelope VCA and crank this up a little bit. And it fades out a lot longer. A little bit basic, but I thought I would just mention that just in case. Or if it fades out like that too quickly while we're holding it, we can just bring up the sustain like this. All right, so moving on from there, next one is going to be kind of sort of mini, because this is kind of sort of like the Mini Moog Model D. Right, so we have our cutoff here. Traditional resonance, although keep in mind, so with this resonance here, because this patch is using the mini filter here, the more we increase this resonance, we do lose some low end, so that's why this one is kind of a little bit almost to the bottom as it comes by default, so just be aware of that once you're using this patch. See how we lose that low end there? Then we have a flanger for the third macro. If everybody knows what that melody is, drop it in the comments and let me know that you know what's up. Moving on from that, we have another lead called Marty's Hoverboard. I wonder what Marty that could be. We have a cutoff over here. We have a traditional resonance. And then we have our noise over here. There's a lot of noisy gear back in the day. But we can always take it away or add it to taste depending on how we want it. And then our traditional effects knobs over here. Next up, we have Retro Waves, self-titled. And this one is also kind of cool if you just pop on the sequencer and then hold down a note. So yeah, I think you get the point for that one, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have Silver Moon. Kind of a brighter, pluckier kind of sound. Traditional cutoff, resonance, noise, and effects. Next up, we have Tom Sawyer. So if you know what this is, please also drop it in the comments and let me know that you also know what's up. I just kind of want to start singing the lead right there. Yeah, I've been listening to that song recently, so I thought might make a patch to sound something kind of like that. It's kind of fitting, right? So this one comes with a couple of cool things here. So we have a sweep speed, and we increase this. Goes a lot faster. But be careful because there's a lot going on in this patch, and the low end can build up a little bit. So maybe use an EQ if you need to. I kind of did just to fit it in the track a little bit. So yeah, I thought I'd keep that or mention that before we move on to the next macros. Then you have some FM to kind of change the timbre of it. Give some crunch to it, I guess. And then why don't we add some glide here? You can always increase the speed here and kind of use this a little bit as a, kind of a slower kind of lead here. But keep in mind, this is one of those patches that you don't really want to play a lot of notes at a lot of the same time because it can build up a lot because there's a lot going on here. So yeah, Tom Sawyer is a pretty interesting one, especially with the drum loop in the background. Okay, so moving on. When squares glide, another lead. And keep in mind, even though it says lead, you can use these as pads too. You can always increase the release or the sustain or something like that. Maybe increase the attack as well. Or just play it like a pad. They don't necessarily always have to be a lead or, you know, hopefully you know what I'm saying there. Like right there, I'm playing this lead kind of like I would play a pad. Or you can do something lead. So yeah, hopefully you get the point there. We have cutoff resonance, low saw. So this one's kind of interesting too. So if we take this out, it becomes much thinner. But if we want some at low end there, there it is. Hit the gym a little bit, kind of beefed up a little bit. So here we go. So moving on, we have two pads here. The first one's going to be Shining Galaxy, and this is a classic synth pad. We have a cutoff, resonance, sub, and effects, so pretty self-explanatory. In a lot of these pads or these patches as well, the macros are very heavily relied upon to either automate or play live or something like that, because it really brings the character to the sounds here. And last but not least, this is another pad called Time to Forgive, so maybe think about your sins a little bit. So these are pretty self-explanatory. We have the cutoff resonance. The phaser is a little bit different though. This is more so a subtle effect to kind of just get a little bit extra interesting timbre out of the sound here. Alright, so that was Retro Waves. Please let me know if you like this pack here. Maybe we can do a second volume or something like that. This one was really fun to make. These sounds are just pretty awesome. So With that being said, if you'd like to get a copy of Retro Waves, there's a link in the video description below, and you can click on that and it'll take you to the Gumroad page where you can get it if you like this patch here. So if you made it all the way to the end, also drop another comment and let me know, because this was kind of a long one. And yeah, let's close this out with Retro Waves. And yeah, here we go. Oh, yeah, we got to have our mastering stuff on, right? We can't let it play like that. Here we go. Thank you guys so much for watching and sticking out to the very end, and we'll see you in the next video.